Welcome to the Dissecting the Wisdom of Shaltazar episodes. My name is Jeffrey Eisen. I'm a spiritual life coach, the channeler of Shaltazar, and an energy intuitive. In these episodes, my collaborator and friend Mark Lane and I will be picking a particular message in each episode that we will be reviewing, having a conversation about, and dissecting the wisdom from. The messages from Shaltazar are very high-level master teachings, and it is key to peel them away, dissect them, comment on them, and discuss them in order to get the greatest value. We hope you'll be intrigued, we're confident you'll learn, and we know you will benefit. And welcome back, everyone, to Dissecting the Wisdom of Shaltazar with my fellow collaborator and good friend, Mark Lane. Welcome back, Mark.
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you. Good to be here.
Excellent, excellent. And today you've picked an interesting message for us to dissect, and that message is?
Moving to a higher circle.
Interesting. And why don't you tell the listeners what drew you to that message, and why did you decide that that's the one that we're going to talk about today?
That's always the interesting, mysterious question, isn't it? I'm not 100% sure, but truth be told, as I was putting away, I print the messages out and I listen to them and then read them and then listen to them again. And as I was putting the Unity Consciousness message away, this was the next one on the pile. And a line that I had highlighted caught my eye, and I was like, this kind of seems like it's connected to what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks. And I thought, well, Spirit is leading me in this direction, so let's see what it says. And so I listened to it again, and it has a lot of information with respect to everything that's going on right now in society and around the world. So I thought, well, maybe this is the one that we need to talk about next.
Yes, excellent choice. And thanks for sharing how you did that, because I think it's important for people to realize that when you get out of the way, your guidance, your intuition, your sixth sense, your gut feeling, whatever it is you want to call it, will lead you in a direction if you're open to it. And I would suggest that any message we pick to dissect is a good one or a right one, but this one is very, very specific. And I know when people are going to go back and listen to this series, they're going to find it very uncanny that we pick the messages that seem to evolve and lead from one to the other. And that was not our intention. So certainly a plug for surrender. Keep doing that. Just wait for Spirit to guide you in what it is you want to talk about. And this is really one of my favorite. It's a little bit esoteric and it's a little bit mystical. And interestingly enough, as I re-listened to it lately after you gave me your choice, and I love the way you do that, because you don't really give me your choice until the day we're recording this, and I love doing it that way because then I don't have too much time to think about it. I just listen to it and read it and then see where it's all going to go. And as I'm listening to it, there's a couple things that caught me. One was the essence of what they were saying sounded like it was relevant today. It was like, oh, this is one of the recent ones. So I had to go and look back, and it was May of 2018 that I channeled this message, and yet it seems so timely today, which is kind of really neat. And then the other thing that caught me is somewhere in here it refers about moving above the fourth dimension, and it's like, gee, that's one I just channeled, a few months ago, and yet, the seeds of that one were sown, so to speak, back in May. So I found it's really fascinating. I encourage listeners to let go and let Spirit guide you. It's really quite interesting. This one starts out in one direction and then seems to take a bit of a turn or intensify. My favorite part of this message is the last half of it, the last part of it. But even in the beginning, the first half of it has got some really interesting stuff. And this is one where Shaltazar uses some analogies, some metaphors, some visualization to drive the message home. Tell me some of the feelings and thoughts that came up for you as you reviewed this message.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of begins with a metaphor of a storm. Shaltazar often says that, that we're in a time of great change, right? And it kind of connects the idea of change to a storm, and the fact that, that life sends us these storms. As we experience them, we're unsettled, unhappy, fearful, stressed, and then the storm passes. It's the energy dissipates, and things return to what we would consider normal. And so we kind of get to take a breath and say, okay. And then the next storm comes, and the moving to a higher circle part, as you described, kind of the esoteric part of the part that's a little bit difficult to grasp because we're such linear thinkers. The idea that there's a sentence in here that says it's not the same. It's not another storm following in line behind the first. It's the same storm coming around again in a circle, and it's going to keep coming around like a merry-go-round until we learn to get off of that circle and rise above that storm. Mm-hmm. So I guess that was the kind of the meaning that I took from it.
No, absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I've reflected a little bit about the circular nature of those storms in my life. I'm 68. I've had lots of storms, and hopefully I will have lots more. You notice I say hopefully, because part of this message says that when you are fortunate enough to move above the circle storm that you're on, you get to advance to a higher level of consciousness where there's a whole other set of storms to deal with. Have you noticed in your life any circular nature of those storms when you're able to reflect back in a way that, when they were happening, they felt linear? It's sort of like, whether it's money or time or whatever it is, have you noticed some circular nature? Have you noticed something that ties those storms together when you look back saying, oh yeah, that was the same issue I was supposed to learn. It just came forward dressed in a different costume.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. There are probably a number of examples in my life. You and I have talked about my relationship with money before, and that seems to be a very prevalent one in my life. There have been times back when I was, in my 20s where money became an issue. And if I look back now, with hindsight, 2020 hindsight, I can see it was the same issue that just kept circling back. And what I guess the idea of moving to a higher circle, each time the intensity was different, right? The first time was very intense and, also causing and health impacting and all sorts of negative repercussions and vibrations from the first time. And then the second time, different, still intense, but not quite as debilitating, let's say. The most recent time, kind of, I don't know how I would describe it, momentarily intense, but quickly passing. So, just what was a huge line of thunderstorms at the beginning that lasted for days turned into a smaller line of thunderstorms that lasted maybe one day, and then this turned into a brief cloudburst, and that was it. So that idea of progression as you grow and learn and evolve.
Yeah, that reminds me of something that Shaltazar calls the layers of learning. It's sort of life is like this onion, right? And so, and it's interesting because it's easier for our linear mind to, if we can grasp the circular nature of these lessons that we're here to learn, we tend to minimize them by thinking that it's one circle, one lesson, but it's not really, because on different circles of consciousness, you could have something like a money issue that is going to have a component of 2 or 3 circles, and you learn one layer of it on one circle, and then you learn another layer, and then you learn another layer. So it's not quite as linear, even in a circular fashion, that it's one circle per issue. In the message, they sort of talk about these concentric circles all connected, and it's that connectivity that's important. And it's interesting because, over the last couple of discussions, we talked about time. And as you were talking about, your money circle, which of course I have a money circle as well, I'll never forget when I decided to sit down and journal with a $20 bill and think that maybe this $20 bill would give me some insight into the storms that were coming around about money. But I believe that even time and money are somewhat connected because it's around lack and abundance. And so there's this multidimensional aspect, and Shaltazar talks about that. I think that the line that you referred to, by moving to a higher dimensionality, by realizing that the storms are not coming forth in a linear progression, and here's the learning for today, the storms are coming forth in a circular fashion. They are not several different storms coming forth one after the other. No, they are the same storm repeating over and over again. They appear different, they appear linear, but they are not. That is an illusion. Okay, and the key to this is the reaction, the response, the reaction you have to the storm determines what comes next. If you allow the scared, fearful feelings after each storm to build one upon the other in a linear way, the storms will keep coming. That does not have to be the case. You can let go and release of the scared feeling remnants after each storm. And it goes on and talking about, detoxifying detoxifying your energy. But it's so interesting how, maybe your time issue is related to your money issue, and the same with me. And so, I encourage listeners to have some fun with this. If you take it too seriously and you try to rush to the finish line by completing the most circles, which is sort of that attitude that some of the people have with video games these days. It's like, and the levels in video games are very much like this concept of circles. But the video game, the object is to win. The object is to get to the end. Whereas I think what Shaltazar is saying is there is no end point. It's all about the game. It's all about the experience. So enjoy that process.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually, I never thought about that before, but that video game idea, I don't play video games because...
Me neither.
Maybe because of that, because it seems like a never-ending rabbit hole that you can never climb out of. There's never, accomplishment. You just keep moving and moving and moving. And I guess my perspective is at some point, I hope to achieve mastery. And I don't know that you ever can in a video game, but right. That idea of moving along in steps is very apt.
Well, once you master one game, the manufacturer of that game is going to come up with another version of it.
Right.
So, but that whole concept of, as you were talking, wouldn't it be interesting if we taught the young people to play the game, not to win, but to learn whatever they could, to allow their evolution to be the object of the game, not the winning or losing. And I think that's what this message is all about, is about the idea that, the purpose of human life is to allow the source to know itself beyond its all being and all knowing. And so experiencing these storms and how we figure them out is really the mastery of the game. And with consciousness rising on the planet, I think it's a great opportunity for you to look at it. So, one of the things I would encourage the listeners to do is start looking at the problems that keep repeating themselves, whether they be career, money, relationships, health, whatever it is. Try to look at those issues in terms of a bigger picture of the lesson you're here to learn. It may hold some keys to unlocking that ever repeating pattern.
That's good advice. I think that you really have to stop and become aware of those issues that seem to plague you or to continue to that continue to repeat in your life, because I don't think that we always are even aware of them. It seems like we push them away once the storm ends and try to forget that they ever happened, or we and then we're surprised by them when they come back. But I think when you do that, you kind of circumvent the learning in a way. You don't have the experience that you need to have.
Yeah. And then this message, it's interesting you say that, because in this message, they're saying you can't pretend you know what you don't know, or you can't pretend that you didn't experience something. So consciously, or unconsciously, we try to avoid the storm. We say it's over. The storm is finished, right? If you're in the midst of this terrible experience, when it's over, you kind of sort of cover it over. But the body, the cellular memory remembers it. And that's where they're saying it's important to detoxify. It's interesting. My wife has got this amazing memory. And, if something happened 20 years ago at a particular place and we go back there, she will really expect the same thing. It's like, I was stung by a bee there, so that's where all the bees are, right? Or if you're driving around the city, and Lois used to grow up in the city, if police used to hang out at a particular place for a speed trap, she's saying, you better slow down. There could be a speed trap. And that was like, how many years ago? 30 years ago.
Right.
So that there is that cellular memory that you can't avoid. And, Shaltazar is saying that we need to detoxify. We need to clear that out and realize that part of that detoxification is learning the lesson and moving on. And I think that's really important. I want to cover one other interesting point on this one, because I think in this series, this is the first time we've really raised the possibility or the concept that life is circular. And it's kind of interesting to say that. Give me your thoughts on life being circular. We did talk about moving above the fourth dimension, which was time, which was linear. But now we're talking about an alternative to linearity, and that's the circular nature of life. Is it something that makes any sense to you? Is it just an abstract concept, or what are your feelings and thoughts on that?
Well, I guess in its most basic level, we come into the world knowing everything, but not having the ability to understand and articulate it. And we grow and we learn and we become adult humans. And as we round that peak or start coming back down on the other side, our bodies tend to start to return back to to more of an infantile state, and all that knowledge that we're told that we have upon coming in, incarnated on this planet, now we're consciously aware of it and we can articulate it. And so it seems like, that's a big circle, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just like, just like the seasons of the year. And it's interesting because in the message we talked about a while ago, moving above the fourth dimension, they're talking to us about letting go of the linearity. But now this message and in a number of messages from Shaltazar, they put forward that alternative to linearity, right? I mean, they say in the higher realms, that's infinity. There is no beginning, there is no end. Well, how does that circular nature of life come in? As the soul and the spirit, we incarnate, we live a lifetime, we go back to where we came, and then we go and do it again. So, one thing that I would recommend to listeners is let your mind wander a little bit to think of the examples of circularity in life. It's a difficult concept to just sort of say life is circular when we live in this linear four-dimensional world. But if you can see smaller examples like you gave, then maybe you can start to understand it. And it's important to understand the circular nature of life in a non-linear way. Because if you try to figure it out in a linear way, you're back to linearity. It's kind of neat. Shaltazar has referred in some recent channelings as the law of cycles. Just like, we have new moons and full moons, and the tides have cycles, and the seasons. There are lots of examples of cycles. And so if you are to get a better sense of this, and why, maybe because life becomes a little less onerous if you realize that there are cycles, that, those cycles may appear in layers of learning, and it's like, oh God, I thought I solved that problem. It's back again. It's like, oh, okay, here I am on the circle again. This is right where I am. So I think, the purpose of them telling us is to ease some of our suffering and ease some of our frustration. Yeah. Any big takeaway from this one? I mean, how, did anything you read or listen to, is it going to change your life in a big way?
All of the messages tend to change my life in a big way, I think. That they all give me something to pause and reflect on. I think the biggest, the biggest thing that hit me when I first listened to the message quite a while ago and first read it, and then which resurfaced for me again, was the idea that how you react to what comes your way dictates the next thing that comes your way. And that was really kind of a sobering, whoa, moment for me. Like, all the literature talks about, how we create our own reality. And we are consciously or unconsciously creating what we bring into our life. That really kind of stopped me. And I had to stop and think about, that my bad reaction to something that comes my way, or my resistant reaction to something that comes my way, is going to bring me another opportunity to test my reaction. And now that I've tuned into that more, I notice it happening. Computers are a great example. As soon as I get frustrated with something that's happening on a computer, everything starts frustrating me with the computer. It won't, things won't click, things won't open, things won't stop. I can't get the keys to work. And so I got to go, okay, all right, take a step back, take a breath, and acknowledge that I've learned that lesson, that I have to, be patient, and then everything works fine. So, I mean, it's that kind of a process.
Brilliant. After I ask these questions, sometimes I say, gee, am I really being hard on Mark, putting him on the spot? But every time I ask you one of those tough questions, you come up with a brilliant answer that helps us really dissect the wisdom and drive home the teaching. You are absolutely right. It's so interesting. Therein ties to the circular nature. Every time you react to the computer the way you do with your frustration, you tend to get the same result. And that is the circularity. So those two concepts of how we react and the circularity tie in, because when you stop reacting the same way, you will stop attracting to you that which you don't want in your life. So it's really, really important. You pick the essence of this message, and that's, it's time to become conscious. It's time to wake up. It's time to stop reacting the way we do. And I know we're running out of time, but listening to this message and then reading an article that you wrote that I'm going to be posting about the current situation with racism just made me realize that we as a society have been reacting the the same way with regard to discrimination and racism over and over and over again for hundreds of years. And so this circular nature of life applies to the collective consciousness as well. When we wake up as a humanity and start handling our reaction to other people in a different way, then we will have an opportunity to live more harmoniously and in peace. So not only is this circular nature apply to our individual life, it also applies to the collective consciousness. And as we change, the whole changes. So some of the current problems we're having in the uprisings, you and I talked about it before, we got on, no, it was someone else, sorry. I was talking this morning about the 60s and how, these riots and the race relations, they were there in the 60s, and here we are, 60 years later, and we still have that issue. We're still on that circle, and we have an opportunity to change it by reacting differently. And so hopefully this conversation, the article you wrote, and these continued conversations will inspire people to react differently so we can create a different world.
That'd be wonderful.
Excellent.
That'd be great.
We've run out of time. Thank you so much, Mark. Again, I really, really enjoy doing these things with you, and I hope the listeners will tune in to Dissecting the Wisdom of Shaltazar with Mark Lane and Jeffrey Eisen. Join us again next time, everyone.
See you next time.
Take care. Love and light to you all.